Hey everybody, this is my absolute favorite video of the year, every year. It's the video of where I really cover what does it take to be a great web developer this year. And it covers the basics for people getting into web development. What do you need to learn? In what order do you need to learn it? And it also covers for people who are currently front-end or back-end engineers or DevOps engineers, what do you need to learn this year to keep your skill set really current? So I'm excited about it. There's three things I want to cover real quick up front. One, the link to this mind map right here on Coggle is in the description. So that way everything that's blue is a link to a video that I have, or a course that I have, or some great information on the web. So you want to click on that once you watch this, when you're actually learning all these things, because I have a lot of videos covered already, as you can see. Also, there's some links in the description to the different areas, so you can jump straight to an area of your expertise if you're already, say, a front-end engineer. And lastly, all the opinions on here are my own. Absolutely none of them are bought and paid for. I do not recommend anything on here because someone gives me money to do so. That's very, very important to mention. I do have one link that's an affiliate link, but it's on there. I've been recommending them for a long time anyway, and I'll tell you what that link is. So let's begin. You want to become a web developer in 2018. What does this landscape look like? Well, you're going to learn basic front-end development, and then you're going to become either a front-end engineer, which is this road up here, which I'll show you, or you're going to become a back-end engineer, and you can actually learn both and become what's called a full-stack engineer. If I were to give you my recommendation, I would say learn basic front-end. You have to do this anyway. You need to start with learning basic front-end, then become a JavaScript / front-end engineer, and then become a full-stack JavaScript engineer, and then learn other back-end languages. I'll go into more of that detail later on as we go along, but that's my recommended path in 2018 for what's going to be the best for you, the best for your job opportunities and all that. So if you're learning today, you want to become a web developer in 2018, this is what you need to do. Start off by clicking on this link and learning basic HTML. It's really easy to learn. You're going to learn HTML, CSS, and basic JavaScript. So HTML is content for a web page. Every web page you go to is made in HTML. It's basic content. Without CSS, which is style, cascading style sheets, which is what that stands for, you're just going to be able to create ugly, ugly, ugly content. So then as soon as you learn the real basics of HTML, which you can get comfortable in just a few hours, then you're going to start learning CSS. You want to start making that content look pretty and beautiful. So you're going to start by learning the basics of CSS. Then you're going to learn how to do layouts. You're going to use Grid, mostly Grid, and Flexbox these days. Then you want to learn how to do responsive design. Responsive means that same HTML will look different and display different on an iPhone than it will on a big old desktop computer. That's called responsive. And then responsive images and CSS animation. You honestly probably don't have to learn too much in CSS animation for the basics. But that's kind of your basic CSS skill set. And so again, you learn basic HTML, then learn CSS and the rest of HTML together as you go. So once you have those down, then you're going to start learning basic JavaScript. Now, JavaScript is the function to a web page. So say on Twitter, you go and add a new tweet. It shows up in your timeline right away. It just appears on the page. That's JavaScript doing all those smarts. Let's say you reply to a tweet and then it somehow goes and notifies everybody else's phones. Well, JavaScript is telling that web page, hey, send out this new tweet. That's the function. JavaScript is also a programming language. So this is where you start to learn basic programming. And here's kind of the things you'll want to learn on here. I won't go through really what they are. You can learn them as you go. jQuery is on here. You don't really need to learn jQuery anymore. But I put it on the list because the skill sets, there are jobs for just this skill set here, and they tend to know HTML, CSS, and oftentimes those companies will use jQuery. So it's a decent thing to familiarize yourself with while you're at this stage. I call this the website developer stage. You can create websites, but you can't necessarily create web apps. Like you couldn't go create Twitter, but you do know how to create like a brochure site. You know, it has flat information, maybe for a small business or a restaurant or something. So this is a skill set you can start getting work for. You can start making money, maybe even get a full-time job. And then as you go down one of these two paths, then you can really become a career web developer. So that's basic front end. That's what it takes to do basic front end in 2018. So then as you pick a path, again, I recommend this path first and then back end. But as you pick a path, you're going to want to learn this to-do list as you go. You don't have to learn it all overnight, but you do want to learn them as you're going. This is kind of just like a learning list for you. So by the time you become a full front-end engineer, you'll kind of have learned these things. You want to learn how to use the terminal. You don't have to master it, but you do want to feel comfortable there. If you're not comfortable in the terminal, in the console, you will start being held back as you go deeper. So terminal is something you want to learn. It's a little intimidating at first, but you pick it up really quickly. Then you're going to want to learn basic SSH, and then how to put files onto a web server with SSH. Then you're going to want to learn GitHub. GitHub is how the world tends to store their code. As a standard, professional developers tend to use Git, and they tend to use GitHub with Git. Then you're going to want to learn how client, which is like a web page, and the servers talk to each other. There's 2 videos I put on this link that are really, really helpful for people getting into web development. It's things that are very difficult to know what you don't know. And that took me years to kind of pick up on, that I've compiled into 2 pretty short videos that I really wish someone would have told me when I was starting out. Learn what a RESTful web service is. That's kind of something that you'll need to learn as you become a front-end or back-end engineer, how you can kind of talk client to server. And then you want to learn domain name and DNS basics. Just a little bit more about what an A record is, what a CNAME record is, stuff like that. And then lastly, I guess I failed to mention it the first time, you want to be able to publish your HTML, CSS, and basic JavaScript to a website. That's really important. I recommend HostGator for this. I've been recommending them for a long time. So I finally did get an affiliate coupon code with them. So if you do click this link or use this code, I may make a buck off of it. So that is the one link on here that I will mention is an affiliate link. So don't use it if you don't want to. There's these drop 25% and drop $10 codes. But Let's Make a Deal, I think, can give you somewhere around 30 to 40% lots of the time. So that is, again, that is my coupon code. Use it to your own peril. And so you want to learn basically how to set up a website. That's the easiest place to do it when you don't know what you're doing is HostGator. They're also one of the cheapest out there. And then you want to learn how to put your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript on that website. So that's basic front end. Once you've got that and you're becoming a front-end developer, here's kind of the things you want to learn. This looks intimidating. This is not very intimidating in reality. Just give me about 1 minute to explain why here. So you basically want to learn 4 things when you're becoming a front-end developer, also known as a front-end engineer or a web developer or a JavaScript engineer or a React developer or Vue developer. Those are kind of the job titles you'll be searching for when you know these things. You're going to upgrade your CSS skills. You're going to upgrade your JavaScript skills, become a little bit more confident as a programmer. You're going to learn some build tools, and you're going to learn 1 or more JavaScript frameworks. Things like this you can learn in more or less a day and then master in a week. Same with a lot of things up here. You can learn so many of these things on this list in a day, at the most a week. This is going to be where most of your learning is going to take place in learning one of these frameworks. So it's really not that big of a deal. So CSS tools and skills, these have been around for years. Nothing's really changed here. Sass, Less, or Stylus are the pre-compilers you want to use. They just add extra functionality to CSS. When it comes to a CSS framework, if you know CSS Grid, you might not need a framework anymore. Being that you do need a framework, Bootstrap or Materialize are kind of the 2 coolest ones these days. I've not gotten a lot of chance with the brand new Bootstrap 4. I need to learn that and do a video on that because it's based on CSS Grid, so it's kind of cool. And then CSS organization is something that's useful in a lot of arenas. Basically, the methodologies for what you name classes and what you call your CSS things when you're developing them. Those are kind of the 3 popular CSS organization methodologies that you want to learn. Again, super easy to learn. And then you'll want to learn a front-end build tool. You want to be able to take all your CSS and compile it up and build it up. NPM scripts are a great way to do that. I cover those in my Node.js course. Webpack is the #1 tool to use. There used to be Grunt and Gulp and Webpack, but honestly, you just kind of want to learn Webpack these days. If you're going to learn one other one, you could learn Gulp, but Webpack is really just the one to know. And then here's a really good document from, I believe, Mozilla on front-end performance and how to learn the areas to make sure your front-end website is performant and put together really smart. So then once you learn that, let's go to JavaScript frameworks. This is really the biggest thing you want to learn to become a front-end engineer, front-end developer, is you want to learn how to program well using a framework. Now, the one to know in 2018 is React.js. If you're going to learn one, learn React. Boom, that is it. React and Vue are the two that I would tell you to learn in 2018. Angular and Ember are still out there with some jobs, but not a lot of new applications are being built in Angular and Ember. So I would say, honestly, don't even worry about those unless you have some spare time and you want to maybe familiarize yourself with Angular, because there's a decent bit of Angular jobs still out there. React and Vue are the two things to know. And so if I was going to build a brand new web app today, if it was small, like a single module, I'd do it in Vue. Just Vue. Just drop Vue on the page. You'll have your module done. It's going to be fast. It's going to be easy. Vue is really great. And then as the app grows, I'm going to use maybe Vue with Vue, this right here, Vue, or Nuxt if it's going to be a larger Vue app. But honestly, personal opinion, once it starts getting into larger apps, I'm going to absolutely use React. Just because, if nothing else, the community solutions and help content available, React is awesome. React or Vue can handle big apps really well, but React is the one to pick these days. So what do you do with React? If I was doing React, Relay or Apollo, if you're going to use GraphQL. GraphQL is a really cool alternative to REST. That's definitely something you want to familiarize yourself with these days. Apollo is probably my favorite. I prefer Apollo over Relay. And then Next.js or After.js, or if you want to do server-side rendered apps, those are really good to look into. And then managing CSS and React, glamorous, emotion, or styled components are kind of duking it out for who's the best. Honestly, they're all going to get the job done well. Each has their advantages and disadvantages. But anyway, no real preference there overall. Just kind of take a quick glance at all of them. But that's how you're going to manage your CSS inside of React. And then you also want to look into state management. So this applies to multiple different frameworks. So with React, you don't want to keep all your data in the React application. You want to keep all your data in MobX or Redux. And my preference would be use MobX for smaller applications. And if they get bigger and complicated and start to get a little shaky with how complex you're doing things with data, use Redux at that point. But lots of people default to Redux these days, and you shouldn't. You should default to MobX because it's way simpler. You're going to get more work done in the day, and you're going to enjoy your developer life more because there's a lot of ceremony to building applications with Redux. And if you don't need that to solve complexity, code with MobX. If you're in the React ecosystem, you'll know what I mean. Flux is good to know because that's kind of where these two came from, but you don't really need to use Flux these days. And RxJS and BaconJS are very fun for learning functional programming, kind of up here. And you can actually use a lot of those methodologies in your other apps as well. And then you want to learn unit testing. How do I test my React.js application? How do I write tests that can run against that app? Jest is definitely the one to use these days. Mocha is also really, really good and has been around for quite a while. But Jest is the one I would definitely go to right off the bat. So that's kind of your JavaScript framework ecosystem of 2018. Not a lot has changed. There's just maturity coming, and Vue is getting a lot more popular. Some other fun things you can learn. Really the only one that's required on here is ES6. If you do not know ES6, you're going to start feeling pretty out of date in 2018. It's definitely something you need to know, which is technically ES 2015, ES 2016, ES 2017. Those are the ones you want to know. Static type checkers are good to know, but you don't have to know these. They're really, really easy to implement. And functional programming JavaScript is definitely something you should kind of walk yourself through at some point as well. You don't need to learn it right away. So that's the front end skill set. You're a JavaScript engineer, or JavaScript developer at this point. Although if you see a job for JavaScript engineer, lots of times that can mean back end JavaScript as well. So be aware of that. All these other jobs are for sure, this skill set that I laid out here. So you've learned basic HTML, you're a front-end developer, front-end engineer. At this point, I would say the next step you should do in your learning process is learn Node.js so you're a full stack JavaScript developer. So you're going to go to backend now and you're going to start really learning how to build out the server side of those applications you've been building in JavaScript. And absolutely, if you're going to pick one backend language these days, pick Node.js. It's one of the easiest and fastest to learn. If you already know JavaScript, it's going to feel really, really natural. Node.js with Express.js is totally the thing to do these days. You're not going to go wrong with it. Also, I have a Node.js course because I absolutely believe in it so much, compiled a lot of great knowledge into not just Node.js, but what it means to be a backend engineer. So if you're new to backend engineering, if you've been in this world for a while, this Node.js course is going to be really, really good for you. A lot of key software engineering concepts for the backend are in here. The job titles that you're going to end up looking for in the backend may be backend engineer, backend developer. They're the same thing. Full stack engineer, full stack developer. Full stack usually means you know at least React or Vue or Angular or something. And then it might just be called a software developer. But honestly, most often it's going to be the language you know. So you're looking for a Node.js developer job, Node.js engineer job, a Ruby job, or a .NET job. They might also be called a platform engineer or a DBA if you're just databases. Whoop, I clicked on something. What did that do? Okay. But DBAs are people who just love and live and breathe databases. And I don't quite understand those people, but they're very valuable. So DBA is something else that's out there. So these are all kind of the popular languages. And honestly, there's many, many more. So many backend languages. So what I'd say is start with Node.js. Don't learn these ones for now. Don't learn any of the other scripting languages if you know Node.js. Instead, learn a scripting language, and then to expand your horizons, learn maybe a functional language, a high-performance language. Notable others, we'll get to that in a second. So if I were to say what languages, plural, should I learn? Node.js first. From there, I would do Golang. And then from there, I would do Clojure. If I'm just going to give you my opinion, learn that first, learn that second, learn that third. There's all sorts of great stuff out there that pays well, that has lots of job opportunity, but these are going to be the ones that I think are going to set you up for success the best in 2018. Java and C#.NET are on here because there's a lot of jobs for that, but these worlds are interesting. Java's been around for a long time, and I don't recommend people to learn these at least not early on, because you might get bad practices, you might get a bad way of doing things, or you might get an amazing way of doing things. They're just a really mixed bag in these two ecosystems. So I say don't learn those right off. You can look at them later on, and then you'll maybe have more opinion. There's a lot of bad Java out there, and there's a lot of bad .NET out there, and then there's a lot of good as well. So that's why I don't ever recommend those to people who are learning. One cool thing to learn is serverless and AWS Lambda. That's a really, really cool thing to learn these days. It's very, very useful to know, and it's a lot of fun to look into serverless architectures. So what you do, I did it again. I zoomed in or something. So what you do when you're learning a new language is you're going to say, I'm learning Node.js. You're going to learn basically these things with the language. You're going to look up, what do they use for package management? What do they use for unit functional testing? So, and it's easy to find on Google, functional testing with JavaScript, functional testing with Golang, unit testing with Golang. Unit functional testing with Clojure. You basically can Google all of these things here. You want to learn, how do you build a RESTful API? How do you build a GraphQL API? What are some security best practices? All these things. These are the things you will want to learn for each language. And honestly, the most difficult thing when you're learning a new backend programming language is not so much the language itself. It's oftentimes the ecosystem. It's knowing what is considered standard. So like, what is the most popular Node.js package for working with a MySQL database? What's the most popular one for working with another database? How do Node.js engineers tend to set up their projects? These are things that just take a while of getting involved in the community to learn how that works. So you tend to feel like a fish out of water for the first couple weeks learning a new backend language. But once you kind of learn the standard ways of doing things, you really start to feel at home quickly. And then you'll also want to learn these databases. You want to learn these databases, how to connect to them and interact with them for each language you do. You'll also want to know how to set them up. So start up here, learn MySQL. That's totally the easiest and best way to start. Postgres is in many ways very, very similar to MySQL. So if you know one, you in many ways know the other. So you want to learn relational databases, and then you want to learn a NoSQL database. That's kind of these two lines here. Redis you tend to use for caching and for keeping track of users, sessions, interacting with your application. Cassandra can also be used for that. Cassandra also finds its home on this line down here, document databases. Search engine databases, Elasticsearch and Solr are the most popular. Graph databases are a very cool kind of newer thing. They've been around for a little while, but they're getting more popular these days. Neo4j, OrientDB, there's several others, but those are two very cool ones to look at. And then message brokers. It's kind of a different way that applications can communicate with each other, aside from making either RESTful or GraphQL API requests. They can communicate over messaging bus. And this is especially useful over really large and complex applications. So RabbitMQ, ZeroMQ, and Kafka are three very popular message brokers. So if you know all those things in one or two languages, I mean, you're doing good. If you know all these things in one language, you're doing good. That's kind of the back-end developer skill set for 2018. So if you're really confident as a back-end developer, another area you can look into is DevOps, which I've covered in the past as well. This is kind of like back-end developer 2.0 / a really niche area of being a back-end developer, where you're just really, really good at deploying and helping teams deploy applications in a professional way. So to be a DevOps engineer, you need to know some infrastructure platforms. AWS is probably the best one to learn. If you're just going to learn one, learn AWS. It's going to put you in the most demand and it's going to pay the best. Azure, Google Cloud, really good. DigitalOcean is great for simpler, smaller infrastructure, simpler, smaller companies. Then you're going to want to learn how to do server management, also called CM or configuration management. The number one thing you got to learn these days is Docker. And then Ansible is a good thing to learn as well. There's Salt, Puppet, and Chef. Puppet and Chef tend to be used on more enterprise level size of things, but they're good to know. But if you learn Docker and Ansible, you've got a cool skill set as well. And those are totally the ways to do it. So Docker is basically going to help you package up an application into a container that you can just put all over the place. You can run that same container here or here or here or here, or on 20 servers on one server. Docker is awesome. You need to know Docker. Honestly, even if you're a back-end engineer, you should know Docker these days. It's very, very important. And then CI pipelines, continuous integration, continuous deployment, making apps deploy as you merge code to GitHub. Really cool solutions for that. Circle CI and CodeShip. Those are ones that are hosted. You pay monthly and they take care of it all for you. Or you can install stuff on your own servers and infrastructure. Jenkins is probably the most popular, but the oldest. Drone CI is a lot of fun, but the least featureful. It's Docker native, so it's really lightweight in the way it runs. I like Drone. It's a lot of fun. GitLab is also a very cool solution that's very all-encompassing. So your whole company either uses GitLab or they don't, tends to be how it works. And then when you learn Docker, Docker's really settled in the last couple years. So Docker used to have all this change and traction and stuff going on, and it's really settled into some stability here. One, I have a course with O'Reilly on Docker. And then if you're building out something small scale, you want to use Docker Swarm, maybe Docker Cloud. If you're building out something medium scale, what would normally be, say 12 servers if you weren't using Docker, Rancher's a great, easy solution for running Kubernetes without having to worry about running Kubernetes. And then Docker Data Center, Universal Control Plane are good if you're more enterprise level, which is good. And then if you're doing stuff big scale, Kubernetes or Mesos are really the two things to use, with Kubernetes really being the one to use. So if you learn Docker with Kubernetes, that's a great skill set for DevOps these days. Lots of demand at all sorts of companies. So there's deep breath. That's what it takes to be a software engineer, web developer these days. Obviously, so much more. Always, you could talk about this stuff for hours, But that's what you want to know. That you learn these things, you're going to be in demand, you're going to get jobs, and you're going to have a lot of fun working with fun, high-tech solutions. So hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a comment. Tell me what any questions you have on any of the stuff that I covered, and have yourselves a great day.